Hey everyone, welcome back to Dev Parkour. I'm Brian Parks, and in this video, I want to convince you that databases have run their course, and it's time for something new for the modern application. So, databases, back when they were first created, were a fantastic tool. The problem at the time was that people had a bunch of data that fit a very particular structure and needed a way to access it in a way that was consistent, performant, and repeatable. Very, very easy to describe, easy to build applications around. There was always going to be the concept of the career software developer who is building an application around the database. So the database, its sole purpose was to store data. Now we have many different applications. I'm going to pick on WordPress because it's the one that's been on my mind, but there are other examples as well. Things like Drupal, purpose-built systems for various domains, all of which have some sort of extensibility built on top of them. And this has created many different problems. Things that I'm not going to talk about in this video include things like the shift from relational databases to NoSQL databases, and the idea that as applications got more and more complex, the needs of the data layer, and in some cases the rate of change, or maybe the consistency between the actual data structures, require different needs. Things like graph databases allow records, the idea of records, to relate to each other in different ways than just what relationships we can define via something like a relational database. Or even, I just need to shove this JSON document in some data store somewhere, and that's it. Or the rate of change and evolution of the application is so fast that I can't wait for the database to change to catch up to the application. I need the application to be able to make that change immediately and be able to recover if, maybe it accesses an older version of a document, or a document created with an older version of the code, something like that. So I'm not going to dive too deep into that, other than to give that fairly brief overview of that shift. Another thing I'm not going to cover in depth is the issue of database version control. There are companies that build version control products for databases. They are fantastic, as far as I can tell, for things like stored procedures and table structures and that sort of thing. But they are not perfect. There are things they do not handle, and they really don't work well for things like CMSs. They just what are they supposed to do? What problem are they actually supposed to solve in that case? The other thing that's always frustrated me about database version control systems is you can't really go to a different branch. It doesn't really make sense. That concept doesn't really make sense in the same way that it does with code. Maybe if you have everything on a singular environment, you can do that, but you still have this issue of what happens to the data. The data typically isn't versioned the same way as the database structure is. So that's another issue that I'm not going to talk about. And finally, the third thing I'm not really going to dive deep into is the issue that WordPress, Drupal, those sorts of developers run into. Especially websites are a big scenario where this becomes an issue of migrating from like a development environment or a staging environment to a production environment, especially if, say, you're making changes to the copy on your homepage in development and then moving that up to staging. Again, there are tools that solve this problem. There are plugins for all of those platforms, I believe, certainly WordPress and Drupal, and I'm sure for the others as well. that try to solve this problem. And I will leave it to all of you in the comments to discuss your experiences with them. I have no personal experience with them, so I really don't know how well they work, if they work at all. But what I do want to talk about is specifically what happens with everything that we're storing in the database. Because with CMS, content management systems, we're not just storing the database. We're not just storing the copy on your homepage or blog posts or things like that. We have data that isn't really data at all. It's not content. It's the definition of our website. It's how our system works. And in some cases, it's even a step beyond that. It's not just the set of plugins that we're using and whether they're turned on or not. It's additional content types that we've defined or additional functionality we've built into the site in no code or low code tools that are actually part of the operation of the site, how the site works at runtime, which is not, when databases first came on the scene, not what databases were initially envisioning would be stored in them. Not what the database creators envisioned for their database tools. And that's a problem, because ultimately what it means is kind of talking a little bit about the things I said I wasn't going to talk about. Those contexts mean that when you're versioning, when you're migrating, when you're storing, there are some things that you do want to store into the database in the database and migrate across environments or version in a version control system, and some things that you don't want to migrate or version. For example, think about your typical blog site. The core roots of where WordPress came from. It was a way to write, build blogging sites, right? The comments that you create, or the comments that users have created, those are things that you don't necessarily want to pull into a dev site. You don't want to be syncing down from production every single time you want to make a change to, say, the color of the homepage, right? Those are two completely separate concerns that need to be separated out. Yet both of those things are stored in the database. And there's no good way to manage what happens to which of those pieces other than to say, I know that this thing needs to migrate up. I know that this other thing shouldn't be touched when I migrate up. Or I know that this one thing should be versioned, and I know that this other thing shouldn't be versioned. But there's no inherent separation between those two things. Similarly, you might want to create posts as part of a development process. I don't know why, but maybe that's part of your process. Maybe that's a thing you want to do. So that's one content type that you want to have go through that sequence of migrations. But then again, comments, that's something that only exists in production. You're not going to be able to make your users, your consumers, create comments in your dev environment. And why would they have access to your dev environment anyway, right? So what this really means is that there's a failing in databases. There's a problem that databases were never designed to solve, and databases still are not designed to solve. There is no database engine that I'm aware of anyway. Feel free to correct me in the comments if there's a database engine you're aware of that does this. There's nothing designed to solve this specific problem. There's nothing that versions what you want to version, but allows data to still exist as data. There's nothing that allows the easy migration of the definition of a CMS, ideally an arbitrary CMS, so that you could, WordPress, Drupal, whatever, all of them have different structures. We can't just assume that tables with this name are part of something that should be migrated, and things with this other name are things that should only exist in the discrete environments. And further, there are nuances within that. So there should be a way to create exceptions to the rule. So maybe there is a page that should always go through the versioning process, but maybe all the other pages, those just get edited in production. That's individual records within a certain table. So that's a challenge in and of itself. Now, I have an idea of how I would solve this problem, and I'm building a tool currently that, I don't know, in a future life, it might solve this problem. It's not quite ready to be shown in a video, which is why I haven't shown it yet. I'm not trying to keep it a secret. I just haven't felt ready to show it in a video. Stay tuned though, coming soon. Be sure to subscribe, click that notification bell so you'll see when I do post that video. But feel free to suggest in the comments solutions that you have to this problem. If you've been doing some process, I'd love to hear about it. I'd love to hear things that work well, things that don't work well. In case I do, this tool that I'm working on, in case it does end up being a decent fit for this problem, I'd love to, make sure I don't inadvertently fall into some traps and pitfalls that you all have experienced with other solutions that have gone before. So hopefully you liked this video. Go ahead and hit that thumbs up button if you did. Leave a comment down below. This really should be the start of a conversation, a start of a discussion. So leave a comment down below about how you would use something like this and the things that you're really looking for in a tool to solve this problem. Hope you enjoyed this. Again, subscribe, click that notification bell. Can't stress that enough. I talk a lot about software engineering, but I also talk about things that are applicable to, I think, the whole gamut of software engineers, including WordPress developers and Drupal developers. So hopefully you like that. Hopefully you will subscribe. Can you tell I want you to subscribe? Hey, subscribe. And I will see you in the next one.